Welcome to another deep dive. Today we're going to be taking a look at this book, Deep End, by Ali Hazelwood, and it's a college romance set at Stanford. And we meet Scarlett Vandermeer, who's trying to balance being pre-med and a competitive diver and, also finding a little romance along the way.
It's really interesting how Hazelwood takes this, what seems like a really fluffy romance, and uses it to kind of explore some more serious issues like the pressure on student athletes, the toll that injuries can take, and how hard it can be to balance, your personal life and your academic goals, all at the same time.
Yeah, it's definitely not your typical kind of light and flucky romance. Scarlett's a former, junior Olympian, and she's dealing with this really bad injury that happened at the NCAA finals. And it's not just like a sprained ankle, it's serious stuff, a concussion, a ruptured eardrum, even a pulmonary contusion.
The book doesn't just list out these injuries. It really goes into how much this experience just totally throws Scarlett off. She's forced to redshirt for a whole year. And, for someone who's such a high achiever like her, that's got to be huge. It makes you think about all these athletes whose whole identity is tied up in their sport. And then suddenly that's gone. What do they do?
And it's not even just the physical recovery either. She's joking around about needing Advil before her next dive, but she's using humor to cover up a lot of pain and fear, I think. And it makes me wonder if that comes from her upbringing a little bit. Her stepmom, Barb, is this super successful orthopedic surgeon. So that must add a whole other level of pressure,
That's such a good point. The book kind of hints that Scarlett's need for control. Yeah. You see in everything she does, how she plans everything out, how she reacts to this injury. Maybe it comes from this pressure to be perfect, to live up to her family's expectations.
Yeah. It's she needs everyone to tell her she's good enough because she doesn't know how to tell herself that yet. And as if dealing with the injury and the pressure to succeed wasn't enough, Scarlett's also trying to get through her pre-med classes, and she's really struggling with the German requirement, which is just another thing she can't control.
Well, that's so smart of Hazelwood to use that to show another area where Scarlett just feels totally lost.
Yeah.
Learning a language is so different from diving, which takes precision and discipline.
Yeah.
So she's forced to face her weaknesses,
And then there's Miriam, Scarlett's roommate. I love her. She's so funny and just tells it like it is and has all these great one-liners. When she tells Scarlett she should just switch to Latin.
Yeah.
What if you decide to join Doctors Without Borders in ancient Rome?
Miriam's bluntness and her humor, it's such a good counterpoint to all the heavy stuff that's happening in the story.
Yeah.
Reminds us that even when things are tough, having a good friend can make all the difference.
For sure. Speaking of things that are tough, the book does a really good job of showing how intense competitive diving really is. It's easy to underestimate how physically demanding it is, but Hazelwood makes it clear that the impact of hitting the water is no joke.
It's actually way bigger than in football.
Yeah.
And it's not even just the physical part. Think about how focused you have to be, how precise to do these dives. There are 6 groups. Forward, backward, reverse twist, arm stand, and inward.
And the inward dives, those are the ones that Scarlett's having the hardest time with because of her shoulder. It's a constant reminder of the injury she's trying to come back from. It's so cool how Hazelwood uses those details to connect the physical and emotional parts of what Scarlett's going through.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it makes you wonder how athletes deal with, not just the physical part of a serious injury, but the mental and emotional part too. Hazelwood explores that, not just with physical therapy Scarlett's doing, but also through her sessions with this therapist, Sam.
Right. Scarlett doesn't love going to therapy at first, even though she knows it's good for her. It's another area where she has to be vulnerable and give up some control.
Which brings us to the heart of the story, Scarlett's relationship with Lukas Blomqvist, who is the swim team captain, world champion, total romance novel hero.
Except for one thing, he's Scarlett's best friend's ex-boyfriend. So much drama.
Yeah. Classic setup, just raises the stakes right away.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is that their relationship, it starts out as this casual thing, almost like a business deal.
But of course it turns into something more, which, forces Scarlett to deal with her control issues in a whole new way. I mean, she's used to being in charge, but with Lukas, she finds herself wanting to let go, to surrender,
And that whole wanting to surrender thing, it's so interesting because it seems like it comes from her need to be told she's good enough to be affirmed. It's she's looking for someone else to give her what she can't give herself.
It's she's trying to find outside of herself what she doesn't have inside. And Lukas, he seems to get that. He's perceptive. But before we get too deep into their relationship, let's step back for a second and look at some of the little details that Hazelwood puts in this first part of the story.
Okay, I'm listening. What really stood out to you?
Well, there's that part where she describes the diving platform as being 33 feet high, like two giraffes, which is, kind of quirky, but it also shows how she's always measuring and quantifying things, even her fears.
And then there's that part where she's talking about the Stanford gear and how it's like they want to just reduce athletes to their scores. She thinks never forget you are what you score, which just shows the pressure these athletes are under, especially at a place like Stanford.
Totally. It's like they're constantly being judged based on what they achieve. And speaking of judgments, did you see that one customer review that mentioned soft BDSM content? I'm definitely curious about that. It seems like Hazelwood's going to explore some themes of power and control, not just in Scarlett and Lucas's relationship, but also like within Scarlett herself.
Yeah, it definitely adds another layer of, complexity and intrigue.
Mm.
So we've got this high-achieving athlete dealing with a career-ending injury, a complicated family, a crazy academic schedule, and a romance with her best friend's ex. What could go wrong?
That is what we are about to find out.
Picking up where we left off, we have this really interesting character, Scarlett, and she's dealing with the aftermath of this serious injury. And it really makes you think, about how tied up our identity is and what we do, especially for high achievers like her.
Yeah, it's like her whole world was built around being this great diver, and now like everything's kind of falling apart. And then to make things even more complicated, she's starting to fall for Lukas, who's, her best friend's ex.
Exactly. And remember how we were talking about Scarlett's need to be in control? That's a big part of her romantic life too. With Lukas, she's kind of exploring a different side of herself.
Yeah.
A side that's willing to let go and even submit,
It's interesting because it seems like that desire to submit comes from this place of wanting to be told that she's good enough. She
Right.
needs someone to validate her, not just as an athlete, but as a person.
That's it. It's like she's trying to fill this emptiness inside her with external affirmation, and maybe that comes from her upbringing and the pressure she's always felt to live up to her stepmom's expectations.
Right. And Lukas, he seems to understand that about her, but, it's not all perfect, right? The whole best friend's ex thing adds a lot of tension and drama.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Hazelwood doesn't try to make it simple. There's guilt, there's awkwardness, and there's this fear that their secret's going to come out and just totally devastate Penelope.
You know what I like, though, is that the book doesn't make Penelope out to be the bad guy. She's hurt and she's acting out, but you can understand why, it makes her feel like a real person.
Yeah, that's a sign of a good writer. Hazelwood can create these characters who aren't perfect.
Mm-hmm.
They make mistakes, but you still feel for them.
And we can't forget about the whole backdrop of college athletics. The book really shows how intense the training is, the pressure to perform, and that special bond that athletes have with each other.
It's not just about the physical stuff either. Hazelwood gets into the mental and emotional side of it. The fear of getting hurt, the frustration of setbacks. It's a side of college sports that we don't always see.
Remember how Scarlett's coach is always checking in on her, even though she's redshirting?
Right.
Yeah, for those who don't know, that basically means she's taking a year off from competing, but she can still train with the team. It shows how supportive the coaches can be, even when an athlete isn't, actively competing.
And then there's Miriam with her tough love and her hilarious one-liners. She's another source of support for Scarlett. Their friendship feels really real, with its ups and downs, just like real friendships.
Totally. Like that scene where Scarlett totally bombs her German test and Miriam just says, "You fucked up, my dude." It's harsh, but it's also supportive in a way. They're not afraid to be honest with each other, and that's what makes their bond so strong.
Yeah, it's a great example of how Hazelwood balances the serious stuff with humor and lighter moments.
Speaking of lighter moments, we can't forget about the whole steamy romance part. Remember that mention of soft BDSM content? Well, Hazelwood definitely delivers on that, but in a way that feels tasteful and consensual. It's not just about the physical act. It's about exploring those power dynamics and control in a relationship where there's trust.
It's actually pretty smart how she connects those intimate scenes to Scarlett's whole journey of letting go and becoming more vulnerable with Lukas. She can explore this part of herself that she might not have felt comfortable showing anyone else.
And it's through those intimate moments that their emotional connection gets deeper too. It's not just physical attraction. It's about finding someone who sees you, accepts you, and lets you be yourself, even the messy parts.
Such a nice portrayal of how intimacy can help you grow and learn about yourself.
So we had this mix of college athletics, a complicated romance, and this deep exploration of trauma and recovery. It's a lot to deal with, but Hazelwood does it in a way that's entertaining and makes you think.
She really does. She blends all these different elements into a story that just keeps you hooked.
And speaking of the story, I need to know how it all ends. How does Scarlett deal with the fallout with Penelope? Does she get over her fear of those inward dives? And will she and Lukas find a way to make their relationship work?
Well, for those answers, you'll have to stick around for part 3. We'll be back after a short break to talk about the exciting conclusion of Deep End.
So we left off with Scarlett and Lukas. Things are heating up between them, but there's this big secret hanging over their heads. What happens when Penelope finds out?
Well, it's not pretty. She feels totally betrayed by both of them. And, I mean, who wouldn't? Their whole friendship just blows up.
It's really sad. You can just feel Penelope's pain and anger. It's not just about losing a boyfriend. It's like she's lost this trust she had in her best friend.
And this is where you see Scarlett start to grow. She finally realizes how her actions have affected other people, how her need to be in control and to be validated has made her kind of blind to how other people are feeling.
Yeah, she has to face some hard truths about herself, like, how she tends to put her own needs before her friends. It's tough, but it's something she needs to do to, become more self-aware.
And Lukas, I got to give him props. He owns up to what he did. He doesn't try to make excuses or downplay Penelope's feelings.
Right, he actually apologizes and gives Penelope space to deal with everything. It shows a lot of maturity and respect, which you don't always see in these love triangle stories.
But let's be real. Apologies don't just magically fix everything. There's a lot of hurt there. It's going to take time to work through.
Definitely, it takes time for Scarlett and Penelope to even start to fix their friendship. It's not about forgetting what happened. It's about learning to forgive and move on.
And you see this same kind of healing happening with Scarlett and her diving. She starts to face her fear of getting hurt again. She pushes herself to try those inward dives, even though they're the hardest ones for her. It's like her emotional growth is showing up at her physical training.
Like she's finally ready to face her fears, both literally and, figuratively. And Lukas is there for her the whole time, not just as her boyfriend, but as her coach, too, supporting her.
He pushes her to be her best, but he also gives her a safe space to be vulnerable and talk about her doubts. A really good example of a healthy relationship where both people feel supported and understood.
And in the end, Scarlett doesn't get back to the level she was at before, but she finds something way more important. She finds a sense of peace and acceptance about herself and, all her imperfections.
It's a powerful message about letting go of being perfect and embracing, the things that make us human. Scarlett realizes that her worth isn't about what she achieves. It's about who she is.
And that's something we can all relate to, right? The pressure to succeed, the fear of messing up, the struggle to like ourselves. It's a universal experience, and Hazelwood really captures it in Deep End.
The book reminds us that true happiness is about being vulnerable, learning from our mistakes, and having people in our lives who love and support us no matter what.
And hey, maybe even learning a new language along the way. I love that part where Lukas suggests they both learn Latin together, just in case that whole Doctors Without Borders and ancient Rome thing works out. It's a cute reminder that, life is full of surprises.
So to wrap this all up, Deep End is more than just a romance. It's a story about growth, resilience, and the importance of human connection. It reminds us that even when we feel like we're drowning, there's always hope if we're willing to reach out for it.
If you're looking for a book that'll make you laugh, cry, and think about your own life, Deep End is definitely worth checking out. And who knows, maybe it'll even inspire you to dust off that old Latin textbook. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. Until next time.